In the last lesson, we learned how to divide polynomials by a method called long division. And in this lesson, we will learn yet another method to divide polynomials, and that method is called synthetic division. Now, long division will always work to get you the correct solution. However, synthetic division only works under special circumstances. So if you could pick only one or the other, pick long division because that one will always work. But the reason for synthetic division is because it can be easier and quicker to use if you know how to use it. So with that being said, I'm going to walk you through the process for synthetic division so that you can have that in your arsenal and use it if necessary. So example 1, we see here 2x to the third minus 8x squared plus 7x plus 12 divided by x minus 3. Now with synthetic division, what we do is we take just the number part of the problem and we ignore the variables until the very end. So we see the numbers that are being used. We have a 2, negative 8, 7, and 12. So we can write down the 2, write down negative 8, and then the 7, and then the 12. And then from there, this negative 3, we take the opposite sign of this. So if it's a negative 3, make it into a positive 3. And we're going to write that over here on the side and kind of section it off away from the other numbers. And then I'm going to draw a line right here, and we will then begin the synthetic division process. So this is your setup to prepare for synthetic division. And then from here, what we do is we always begin by bringing down this first number. So we bring down the 2, and then we take the 3 over here, multiply it by whatever is down here. So 3 times 2 would give me a 6, and we write that right here. So there's a 6, and now we take the negative 8 and the 6 and add those together. Negative 8 plus 6 would give you a negative 2. And then we keep repeating until we get to the end. We take 3 times this number down here now, so 3 times negative 2 to get negative 6, and then you add again, 7 plus a negative 6 to get a 1. Repeat again, 3 times the 1 to get 3, then you add 12 plus 3 to get 15. So we're already done, basically, with the problem. The only thing is we need to now write back in the variables. So we started with 2x to the third power, so 2x to the third, and we're dividing by an x. So when you do that, you're going to get a 2x to the second power, right? So this first term is going to be to the second power, so x squared, and then the minus 2 goes with the next degree, so x to the first power, or just an x, and the 1 is going to be just the constant, and the 15 is the remainder. And the remainder you write as a fraction. So 15 over then the x minus 3. And that's going to be your solution. So synthetic division, we just get the numbers, and then at the end we put in the variables to finish off. And notice how we are in descending order. We have second power, then we have x to the first power, and then the constant, and then the remainder at the end. Let's try another one. And in this one, notice the fact that we are missing a term. We have a fourth power and a third power, but we are missing the second power. And then we have x to the first power and then the constant. So same thing as with long division. If you're missing any terms, and by the way, that includes the constant, so if the negative 6 is gone, make sure you put in a constant if there's no number out there. So what we have is a 1, and then we have the negative 3. Then we're missing the x squared term. So we put a 0 in for the x squared term. And then we have a 12. And then the negative 6 out here at the end. And then looking at the 2, we take the opposite of this. So if it's a positive 2, we're going to make it into a negative 2. Put that over here on the side. And kind of section that off. Draw a line down here. And then we're ready to begin the synthetic division process. So step 1 is always bring down this first number, and then you multiply this negative 2 times whatever's down here. So negative 2 times 1 would give you a negative 2. And then you add negative 3 and negative 2 to get negative 5. Multiply negative 2 and negative 5 to get a positive 10. Then you add 0 and 10 to get 10. Multiply again, negative 2 times 10 to get negative 20. And then you add to get negative 8. Multiply negative 2 by negative 8 to get a positive 16. And then you add negative 6 and 16 to get a positive 10. So we're basically done. Here are the numbers. We just need to now put in the variables. So we started with x to the 4th power. We divided by an x, so it's going to decrease the degree down to x to the 3rd power. So this becomes 1x to the 3rd power. Then we have a second power, so negative 5x to the 2nd power. And then it's going to be a 10x to the 1st power. And then minus 8 is your constant. And then this is going to be your remainder. So the remainder you could write as a fraction. So we have 10 over the x plus 2 that we are dividing by. And so this right here would be my solution. So once again, make sure you put in the zeros, and then once you have the numbers, put in the variables in descending order. Now, as we said, this only works if we have a binomial that we're dividing by, and only if there is a coefficient of a 1 in the front, and as long as the exponent is a 1 as well. Now, if the coefficient is not a 1, that is the only thing that we can kind of manipulate to make into something we can actually solve. So for example, here we have a 2 in front of the x. Now when you want to divide this, okay, we can think of this maybe a little differently, where the numerator, it's going to stay the same, but then I want this not to be a 2 but a 1. So what I can do is I can pull a 2 out. And when I pull a 2 out of that x minus 3, in parentheses I'm left with an x right here, because I'm thinking of reverse distributing. 2 times x would give me a 2x, but then 2 times something would give me a negative 3. Well, what I did, maybe another way of thinking of this, would be the 2x I divided by 2, the negative 3 I need to divide by 2 as well to get negative 3 over 2. Okay, so what I have is going to be all of this divided by x minus 3 over 2. And the 2, you can kind of put this out on the side. So what I want to do is I want to do this first, which I can do, and then at the end I'm going to multiply by 1/2 to account for that 2 that was in the front. So everything is going to stay the same, except for at the end, we're going to have to multiply by 1/2. So let's try this one. Here, we're going to write the coefficients. We have a 6, 7, this is a 1, and then a 1. There's no terms missing, so we're good there. 6, 7, 1, and 1. And then the number in the corner is going to be the opposite of this. This is a negative 3/2. We're going to make it into a positive 3/2. And then we can start the synthetic division process. We can begin by bringing down the 6. So we have 3/2 now times the 6, which gives me, I'll do this over here for those who don't know how to multiply fractions too well. 3/2 times, sorry, that's a 6, not a 16. 3/2 times 6, we have 18 over 2, which is going to give me 9. So this would be 9. And then we can add 7 and 9 to get 16. So then here we have 3/2 times 16, or 16 over 1. And this 2 and 16 can divide. We have 8 over 1. 3 times 8 is 24. So 3/2 times 16 gives me 24. I can add 1 and 24 to get 25. Multiply one more time. 3/2 times 25, or 25 over 1. That gives me 75 over 2, or I can think of that as 37.5. So that is 37.5, and I can add those together, 1 and 37.5, to get 38.5. Alright, and then from here we have our numbers. We just need to put the variables back in. So we started with the 3rd power, So now this would become 6 times x to the second power. And then the next one is x to the first power. And then the next one is the constant. And then the last part is going to be the remainder, which is going to be 38.5 over what I'm dividing by. And I was dividing by x minus 3 halves, right up here. Divide by x minus 3 halves. So take note, we're not quite done because we have this 1/2 out here to account for. So at the end, I now need to multiply everything by 1/2. So then multiply 6 by 1/2, or divide by 2, same thing. We got 3, then x squared. 16 divided by 2 would be 8x. 25 divided by 2 would be a 12.5. And then 38.5 over x minus 3 halves divided by 2. I'll do that over here. We have 38.5 over x minus 3 halves, then times 1/2, or divided by 2, same thing. What we do is we multiply x minus 3 halves times the 2, which gives me a 2x, and then 2 times the negative 3 halves would be a negative 3. And the numerator stays the same. So now we have a 38.5 over, then 2x minus 3. So this here would be your solution. And that concludes our lesson for today. We will see you next time.